Comrades.
Camarades.
Comrades.
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 Camarades.
Comrade. Comrades.
Comrades, sit down. You are embarrassing Canada. Hello and welcome back to Losin It. I'm your host, Stephanie Hunter, and this is where we lose it about Canadian politics and social issues. And today we are definitely losing it about the NDP convention. If you were paying attention over the weekend to any social media, you probably realized that everybody and their mother internationally are making fun of Canada. They are absolutely taking the piss out of us over this NDP conference. I don't think anybody who attended this NDP conference expected it to go viral. In fact, by their behavior, I'm pretty sure I know they didn't. They just got together to discuss their resolutions and elect their new leader. And I think things got a little out of hand even by their standards. And now everybody is seeing them, they're totally exposed. That being said, I am going to try to talk about it without making too much fun of everyone. I think lots of people online, lots of comedians, lots of commentators have already said most of what needs to be said about the people that were there and how ridiculous and idiotic they seem. And I want to focus on the people that actually weren't ridiculous. And what I mean by that isn't that they didn't have idiotic ideas or they weren't completely misled, but there were some people there who were relatively smart, relatively charismatic, who felt very passionately about what I think are really bad and dangerous ideas. And I think that's worth paying attention to. This was a major party in Canada. They've fallen as of late, but I am concerned worldwide that we are seeing an uptick in this socialist communist style of movement. And the NDP is just getting more and more extreme. And we're going to take a look at Avi Lewis and his speech, his acceptance speech. He is the one who won the race for the NDP leadership at the end of the conference. And we're also going to take a look at some of the delegates who were debating on the floor for resolutions. Now, this was kind of a weird process, and I've seen a lot of people online not really understand what was happening. This wasn't a question period for the new leader or a panel of the leaders. People weren't asking questions, they weren't getting up to ask questions. What it was they were going through resolutions that they were going to add to their policy book, and people were getting up to debate pro or con for these resolutions. Now, of course, this was mostly just a bunch of virtue signaling nonsense, and most people were just getting up to do pros, and then the cons was just people going, oh, it doesn't go far enough. And there's a reason for that. There's a reason that the cons were used that way, and it is because of these equity cards.
I'll signal also this yellow card, which is available at all of the microphones. This is a way for a delegate to signal to the chair that they have a gender identity other than man, and this allows you to exercise priority in the speaking order. We will come to you earlier.
And then by the end of the conference, it was if they were any equity-seeking group. And that basically meant that straight white men and normal-looking white women weren't allowed to speak, unless they took themselves over the con mic, because they were going to go pro, con, and nobody actually really felt con. Most of the time there was like, oh, in the 3-day span, I watched all the footage. In the 3-day span, there was like 3 or 4 resolutions where people actually had legitimate con points. Most of the con points were the normal people going to the con mic to go, this doesn't go far enough and this is why. So that was interesting. That was a very interesting point of procedure. It was very stupid.
I think we're ready. Committee, do you feel ready? Let's go.
Of course, this process didn't go smoothly. It's a bunch of leftists getting together to debate things that they already pretty much agree on, but it's interrupted constantly by these points of privilege.
There's a point. Let's hear the point on microphone 1.
Point of personal privilege. I understand there's very little time and for delegates to speak, but early on the mic, it's hard as a racialized and transgender delegate to sometimes use this card and speak to somebody in front of me in line and ask, hey, this pertains to multiple intersecting parts of my lived experience. I'd like to speak. I was rejected.
And some of those were really funny. I've seen a lot of people making fun of those. We're going to explore a couple of them, but it's no surprise to me that nothing got done.
I am going to exercise my authority as your chair and call a vote on the amendment to the amendment about removing discussion of an extended lunchtime.
To replace rooted in with roots in.
Friends, the elves in my ear are telling me that we have more content left to go than the hard stop of our convention.
This was an insane amount of just patting themselves on the back and creaming their spinach over how oppressed and how many equity groups they belong to. It was very silly. One group I really do think we need to focus on is this group called the Socialist caucus of the NDP. And these people are the crazies of crazies, and they're actually pretty well organized. Some of them are pretty well spoken, but they have legitimately insane ideas. Like, take a look at this one.
I would like to say I agree on the first 2 points, and I think that whatever airport infrastructure we do have should definitely be public. But I do not feel that we should be pursuing further investment in airports or the expansion of air travel in general. To be able to fly is a great privilege, and only an estimated 3% of people in the world take regular flights, and over 80% of the global population has never been on a plane. Beyond that, flying is incredibly carbon intensive. There are dozens of countries around the world with emissions per capita less than the emissions of a single person's long-haul flight. And if everyone in the world took just one long-haul flight per year, the total emissions from flying would be greater than the emissions from the entire United States. So if we are to be a party of international solidarity with the common people, we must ask, do we think that everyone should be able to fly and push us forward into climate breakdown? Or do we think that somehow we are special and deserve this luxury? Or maybe do we think it's time to shift away from air travel? So let's invest in high-speed rail, in public bus networks to connect rural areas. It's true that sometimes it's important to fly, say to come to the NDP National Convention.
Yes, of course, the ever-important NDP Convention.
For non-essential reasons like vacations. So let's invest in local tourism here in Canada so people don't need to fly. Maybe we can invest in making people happy with where they live so they don't feel the need to escape. When we recently passed the first irreversible climate tipping points, at a time when us young people, right now we have to worry about not only if we can afford food, but in the future if we're even going to be able to grow food. We cannot be expanding luxury emissions from air travel, especially when it is those with less privilege, those who could never dream of flying, who are already at the front lines of the climate crisis, struggling to survive through flood and fire and famine. Further investment in luxury air travel is the opposite of international solidarity, and it is completely against the interests of the global 99%. Thank you.
Merci.
Now, you're going to see a trend in these videos about making everything a public good. And this goes to airports, like in this clip. But as you'll see, this Alex person says that we should not be able to fly at all. Think of how infringing that is upon your rights to free movement, to live your life as you wish. Yeah, I think if you want to, you should be allowed to go on vacation, Alex. Like, that's absolutely insane. And of course, they invoke climate alarmism and inequity across the world to tell you that you should not have the right to do anything that you want to do. You should not be able to ever get on a long-haul flight because not everyone in the world can. It is so inconceivably stupid. But if you think about it, it's also very dangerous. Imagine that a party with these kind of ideas got into power. Now, of course, this is just a delegate. This isn't a leadership candidate in the race. This isn't going into their official policy. But you'll see the Socialist caucus is standing behind him being like, yes, queen, and everyone else in the crowd is cheering. Everyone thinks this is such a great point, and these people are delusional. Yes, now we have poor Barbara Waldern.
So I am also with the Socialist caucus, and I will be putting my name in to be council representative, BC regional representative later. So, of course, we don't like the arms loophole. We want to oppose the arms loophole. But why was this whole thing proposed in the parliament and elsewhere? In the first place, it was to stop the genocide, to stop the Israeli Zionist U.S. aggression that Canada somewhat supports or is not that strong about opposing. And so we think there should be a more comprehensive resolution, something like this. NDP demand the termination of Canada's role as an accomplice of Palestinian genocide and insist on the immediate implementation of the following measures. Comprehensive two-way arms embargo on Israel. domestic legal accountability and enforcement of economic mechanisms against Zionist and Western colonial settler occupation, international diplomatic and legal measures to condemn and isolate Israel, USA for crimes against humanity, material support for Palestinian liberation, including the right to armed resistance, self-determination, liberation, and the return of refugees from the river to the sea.
Now, she is not the brightest bulb in the bunch, as you can probably tell, but she did say something very worrying to me in her long list of ways she wants to help Palestine, and that is to put economic sanctions on Western colonial powers. Now, I just want to remind everyone that we, Canadians, are technically to these people a Western settler colonial power. And I'm curious what kind of sanctions she wants to put on the Canadian people, because I don't think this just stops at international policy. And I think these people actually want to punish Canadians for being what they consider settler colonialists. And do not underestimate for a second how dangerous that could be.
Long live the struggle of the Palestinian people.
Yes, long live the Palestinian struggle. I don't think that's what she meant, but it is a little funny. Yes, then we have this gentleman who thinks we should not be able to evict anybody in the winter.
1 in 5 Canadians is one paycheck away. 1 in 5 Canadian tenants is one paycheck away from homelessness. That is unsupportable in any country, let alone one of the richest in the world. Our distribution of wealth is so harsh, it matches our climate. And one of the things we should do is we should ban evictions in winter. People should not be thrown out in the street when they have no place to go. We should stop the illusion that we cannot solve the housing crisis now. We can do so by forcing rent controls with teeth.
Which is absolutely insane. We have very good tenants' rights here in Canada, very good tenants' rights, to the point that landlords often get taken advantage of by their tenants by not paying, by trashing the properties, by illegally subletting. It's actually very hard to kick people out. And if you do finally get through the courts to kick someone out, I don't care what time of year it is. That is your right. This is absolutely ridiculous. The idea that someone gets evicted because they're abusing the property or they're not paying, I mean, you have to do something like pretty egregious to get evicted. Like, you have to not pay for like a really long time, like months. So the idea that you would just be surprised, kicked onto the streets in the middle of winter is just not happening. It's silliness. Yes, people become homeless sometimes. That is sad, but it is a point of personal responsibility that does not happen to you. You need to pay your rent. You need to pay your bills. You need to come up with an agreement with your landlord. You need to live in a place that is within your means for the job you are working. Like, the idea that it is your landlord's duty to make sure that you don't get kicked out at an inconvenient time for you is just pure silliness. And then this guy, who is maybe my favorite and most delusional.
I thought there was perhaps a misprint, because I don't see why we would be arguing for fair pay for CEOs. I think Comrade Rob Ashton quite clearly said there is no such thing. There should not be any pay. They do not do anything. It's the workers that create all of the wealth. If we want the working class to have power, we want them to have economic power. And that means that they should be paid a fair wage for what they do, which is everything. And a fair wage for a CEO is zero. So
he thinks that CEOs should make $0 because they do absolutely nothing. And, you know, I think maybe CEOs, I don't know if any CEOs are watching, probably not, but if any are, I would say maybe it's time to have a take your local crazy socialist to work day and just show them what your job is. The idea that the only thing that earns money is labor, physical labor, is ridiculous. There is also mental labor. There is the monetary reward for taking on risk, for adding value to other people's lives. Like, yes, CEOs get paid an outsized amount compared to people who provide less value, who take less risk, who provide less mental labor, and who are less competent.
Like, that just is the case, and that is as it should be. There should be rewards in society for being useful, for adding value. And understand the system isn't perfect. There are absolutely people who are making way more than maybe they deserve, and maybe there are people making less than they deserve. I think there are ways to address some forms of equality, but this idea of equity should terrify you. This idea that you can work harder than everyone else, be smarter than everyone else, be more competent than everyone else, provide more value than everyone else, take on more risk than everyone else, and then be stripped of all the rewards for that is absolutely insane.
The other thing is corporate accountability. I mean, one of the things, of course, we're all in favor of union jobs, but more important than that is public ownership. If we had more public ownership, and I wish unions would argue more for this, argue, please, for public ownership of corporations. Why should we be supporting private for-profit companies whenever, again, it's the workers of our country, the workers of the world, that create all of the wealth? Why are we giving it to capitalists?
The public ownership of private companies. No, that is a terrible idea. That is the hallmark of a system like fascism, a system like communism. Basically, it is a surefire way to allow for authoritarianism. Also, they play this net zero game where you have a certain amount of your money that is your allotment versus that's your slice of the pie given the total amount, and that anything you have below that has been taken from you by the capitalists. That is absolutely the wrong way to think about things. Through capitalism, you can grow the pie. You can earn more based on the value that you give to society, and no one owes you anything. Then, of course, there is just a bunch of virtue signaling. Like, there's this guy who came up to talk about unions. He's the president of QP.
When they turned our strike, our legal strike, into an illegal strike, they were threatening fines. They were threatening jail time. But you know what our brave members did? They told the government that they could go to hell. They told Air Canada that they could go to hell. Friends, this can't just be for the labor movement, about the labor movement. There is an opportunity for all of us coming out of this convention all together to send messages to this government that we're not going to take it. Quoting my friend Dee Snider, we will stand up. We will stand up for trans kids. We will stand up against the war in Iran. We will stand up for our kids, for our grandkids, for future generations. Are you willing to fight with the rest of us, my friends? Let me know if you're willing to fight. We have a real opportunity to build this moment and not take any more of their bullshit, my friends. Let's fucking go. Let's make this a better country for all of us, my friends.
He came up to, talk about the Air Canada union, and at the end, he just goes on about trans kids. There's this woman who comes up on stage. Show you the clip here.
Because ultimately, when the question is, are you old enough to be involved in politics? The answer is yes, because you're old enough to lose your friends to addictions. You're old enough to live paycheck to paycheck to make ends meet, but to only have your employer get rid of your position. And you are old enough for conservatives across this country and across the world to make people who are younger than you public enemy number one.
That's not true. Just because Danielle Smith says no kids should be on puberty blockers, no kids should be undergoing surgeries before the proper age of consent, does not mean that they are public enemy number one. Just because we're saying that men shouldn't play in women's sports and that parents should know if their kids are transitioning at school, does not mean that trans kids are public enemy number one. That's just absolutely disingenuous and ridiculous. Nobody in Alberta says, oh my gosh, I hate trans kids. That is obscene. People in Alberta care about children, and that is why we wanted these policies to go through. And that carries us through to this debate about the notwithstanding clause. And there's a lot. This was a very emotional debate, but there was this one person. I'm going to show you their clip.
The sole purpose of the notwithstanding clause of our Constitution is to limit our human rights. Throughout its history, that is the only thing it has ever been used for, and indeed, that is the only thing it can possibly be used for. Most recently, the UCP in Alberta invoked the notwithstanding clause to suspend our teachers' right to strike and to impose a contract on them. Additionally, and more personally for me as a trans person, the UCP used the clause to pass a trio of anti-trans laws that target trans youth and that also have broad-ranging impacts for every girl, woman, and student in the province.
I mean, she's lost me here. I have no idea what this has to do with women and girls.
The Notwithstanding clause was born out of the cynical calculus that our fundamental freedoms, our legal rights, and our equality rights, that is sections 2 and 7 through 14 of the Canadian Constitution, may one day go too far and need to be suspended for the convenience of the government. The Notwithstanding clause is an existential threat to all of our human rights, and it must be abolished.
And she obviously feels very strongly about the Alberta Notwithstanding clause, but she's just incorrect. The Notwithstanding clause does not exist to strip you of your personal rights. It's been used to amend language bills in Quebec. It's been used to reconfigure city councils in Toronto. And yes, now recently it has been used to end a union strike in Alberta, and to put in these measures about how we're going to deal with children who think they're transgender and women's sports. And I can grant you that if you're coming from this person's perspective, perhaps it seems like it is being used to take away human rights, because they have all these slogans, trans rights are human rights, you know, as if like the ability to medicalize and sterilize yourself as a child is some sort of God-given right that's being interfered with. But what I do not understand, well, what I just think this person doesn't understand is actually what the Notwithstanding clause is. The Notwithstanding clause was included with our Constitution because otherwise many provinces, including Alberta, were not going to join the Union. So if you take out the Notwithstanding clause, which is what their resolution is to do, just get rid of the Notwithstanding clause, don't let anyone use it except the federal government in times of war, you are actually taking away part of our Constitution that was necessary for everyone to agree to join the Union. At that point, I think our Constitution would actually just be null and void, and we'd have to completely redo our Constitution. Now, maybe, given the way that the courts have been ruling on matters, maybe that's not such a bad thing to redo our Constitution, but it would be a big, hot mess. It would be a nightmare for a little bit. And the Notwithstanding clause isn't giving people unilateral power. It says for 5 years, we're putting a pause on a court decision that we don't think reflects the will of the people who have elected our government into power. It's basically a way to stop the judiciary from having too much power, which is important right now because our judiciary is making very bad calls. They're making very ideologically driven, woke calls on things. And it only lasts for 5 years, which means before the Notwithstanding clause expires, there will be an election. So at that point, if people do not like it, they can elect upon the issue. So it is meant to give the electorate the power that they deserve. It is meant to give the people the voice that they asked for. Because once judges are appointed, and so many of our judges are appointed by Trudeau, once our judges are appointed, they're appointed for their career, and that outlasts governments. So if our judiciary is going in a very ideologically towards the left sort of direction, we can't really correct that in time to make calls that people are voting on. So that is why the Notwithstanding clause exists. It is not just to strip people of rights. If it has been used that way in the past, that was a poor use of it. And those issues are no longer protected by the Notwithstanding clause because times moved on, people voted those governments out, the Notwithstanding clause expired. This is a temporary solution, okay? It only lasts for 5 years. It does not unilaterally or permanently strip anybody of anything. I also have some clips about the journalism landscape in Canada, and listen to this clip and tell me what you think.
It's titled Defending Public Journalism, but it really is about defending all free journalism. The best people who can keep the best people who can keep people in local communities informed are those who belong to those communities. But far too many local journalism outlets have been gobbled up by major media conglomerates or closed. Local journalism is being eliminated very, very quickly. What makes it even worse is that these major media outlets are owned by big, giant corporations who choose to push their own agenda. Misinformation isn't just coming from the far left, folks, or the basement podcasters. It's being pushed by mainstream outlets and news items too. Public journalism is something that all Canadians take pride in and rely on. The NDP is the only party standing for reliable, public, unbiased journalism. Both the Liberals and the Conservatives have shown time and time again that they will cut our public journalism, which is an outrage. Funding for CBC and for Radio Canada must be a priority of this party because public journalism has been what has helped define what it means to be Canadian. We have journalists here in this room. They're in the back right now doing the work to report what we're doing and the great resolve we have here. Without those journalists, our message would not be getting out to the rest of Canada.
I think it's very interesting in this clip that this woman thinks that free press means public press. Because given that we have the CBC right now and it is so biased towards the left, that is just so clearly not the case to me. I understand that Brits loved their BBC for a long time. We Canadians loved our CBC for a long time when they're actually putting out high quality, non-biased material. But the idea that because a public broadcaster is public, so a state-funded media, that they would automatically be unbiased or less biased than privately owned media, I think is just completely insane. Yes, there are problems with our media in both the private sector and the public sector. The private sector is being hamstrung by the public sector, and the public sector is so biased towards the left because the right has said that they're going to defund them. So it's just not a good point. But I think it's very funny that she said, thank you to the press for being here, because otherwise Canada wouldn't see what we were doing here. They wouldn't know everything that happened at this conference. And I think that aged like milk. I think she's probably really regretting that sentiment because everyone has now seen the NDP conference for what it is, and everyone thinks that they are stupid. Yeah, and then we have this guy. He's kind of goofy. He thinks that there should be disclaimers about who funded the piece.
Fully support the spirit of this resolution, but I'm about to say something that no New Democrat here has said so far. This simply does not go far enough. Yes, we need public journalism. We need journalists to report honestly where it is needed. But so much of journalism has been corrupted by big money interests. We need the CBC as a public option so that there's no profit motivation. But hypothetically, what is missing off of here, if there's some right-wing newspaper which advocates for the interests of their billionaire owners, we should mandate that there's a little section at the end saying, hey, this piece you just read about why trade unions are horrible, this newspaper is owned by someone benefiting off of you believing that trade unions are bad.
Every journalistic entity has their own biases and has their own point of view, but it is possible for people to disagree with you. It is possible that some people don't like unions for very valid reasons. And, it should be absolutely allowable that we can hear that point of view alongside other points of view. That is the beauty of free journalism, and state-funded journalism is not actually free journalism. Oh yeah, this one was funny.
I would like to know what exactly a carbon border adjustment mechanism is.
We can ask the mover of the resolution to answer that, if you would like.
So a carbon border adjustment mechanism is a way of ensuring that if Canada has, or a country has, a price on carbon, that countries that do not have a price on carbon, on industrial products and things like that, so if they do not have a price on carbon, that those products don't undercut the products that are produced in a country that does have a price on carbon. So
the word you're looking for is tariff, eco-tariff. But then this woman comes and gives a super long-winded explanation, desperately avoiding the word tariff because everybody hates the mango menace to the south of us. And yeah, I just thought that was hilarious. Just use plain English, people. These are eco-tariffs. You're offsetting the competitive advantage that another country would have providing a good because they don't charge the silly carbon tax, and you're going to charge them the carbon tax as it comes into the country as a tariff. There you go. Simple. Crazy, but simple. Yeah, and of course these equity cards, they were a hot mess. And I'd like to draw your attention to one that has been receiving about half the attention it deserves, because everybody has seen this clip.
Yes, hello. I was standing here with my gender equity card before you called on the previous speaker. That's my point of privilege.
And that woman is obviously extremely unpleasant and stupid. However, people don't realize how unpleasant and stupid she is, because this is the man that she was mad that got put in front of her.
When many Iranians are against the war, intervention, but that doesn't mean we support the regime in Iran. We want the regime to be changed.
An actual Iranian criticizing the regime but saying he doesn't want war, agreeing with her from a probably more valid perspective. And yet she is just so entitled. She is so ridiculous. She just seems so unpleasant. Like, oh my gosh. And now we get to the part that I find the most concerning, and that is Avi Lewis's acceptance speech, because in this speech, he shows his true colors. He is a true communist, socialist-minded person. And yeah, it's hard to make assertions of communism in the modern age, because I think when and if, hopefully if, communism does come to Canada, like true communism, it'll look different than it did in sort of the Bolshevik revolution style. I think it'll be slower, more insidious. You know, things slowly become more and more public. All of a sudden, the government owns a lot more stuff. Your land rights, which we've known in Canada are under attack right now, especially in BC, start to become less valid. The government seizes property, means of production. I think it would happen slower than like a true like Bolshevik-style revolution. And that's what concerns me about this speech. Now, we're going to listen to a few clips of it.
And what they definitely won't talk about is who. A tiny group of billionaires that control every part of our economy, enabled by their friends among both liberals and conservatives. They'll blame Trump. They'll blame immigrants. They'll blame indigenous land rights. They'll blame anyone but the CEOs, the corner office class to whom they feel accountable. Only the NDP will tell the truth. The cost of living emergency is driven by the extreme wealth and power in the hands of the 1%. This is more than a rigged economy. It's a war on working people. And it's why you're in shock at the grocery checkout, in tears looking at your bills at the end of the month. It's because the wealth of this country is being hoovered up by a corporate elite who are extracting it from you every single day. It's immoral, it's unreasonable, it's un-Canadian, and we cannot let it stand.
Yeah, I find this ironic because Avi Lewis is a property owner in very nice parts of Vancouver. His wife is a very well-known author. He is a well-known filmmaker. I have no doubt that they are at least in the 2%, if not the 1%. And this is like, it's just such champagne socialism. It is so hypocritical. It actually kind of makes me blush. I think it is just proof that this is not a party of working people. This is a party of elites and the people who absolutely rely on the government to give them money, because I don't think working people actually go for this stuff. And then we come to the religious shame spiral.
$500 billion in a decade for weapons to make Canada a major arms exporter in a war-torn world. Slashing our cherished public services. Sweeping aside Indigenous rights. Full steam ahead, no regulations on AI. And pipelines.
Yes, this is just a cult. Like, shame, shame, shame. It's like, I don't know, people say Catholicism is the religion of shame. I think it's whatever this is. This is just gross. Like, it has such a gross vibe to it. You know, pipeline, shame, you know, things we need to bring energy across Canada so we can provide locally for our energy needs. Shame. I mean, these people are out of touch.
Our NDP has a different offer for this country. Our plan is to Trump-proof the economy by investing massively in Canadian economic independence, using the unmatched power of public ownership to ensure the fundamentals of a good life. A network of public providers for food, phones, and internet. A public housing developer and public construction companies to build millions of non-market homes. a 21st century electrical grid, an EV bus revolution, and a heat pump in every home, built with Canadian steel, creating tens of thousands of unionized jobs.
Yeah, and I was really glad he went through this list of everything that he wants to make public. You know, you can add airports onto that list. He said food, but, you know, more so grocery stores. He wants to make all of these things public. And I want you to think about, when the government owns everything, what do you own?
It's a good question, friend, and one of my favorites.
You own nothing. What is ownership? Ownership is the freedom to have the right to do whatever you want with the things you own. If you own nothing, you have no freedoms. You don't get to do anything because nothing is yours. No resource that allows you to do anything belongs to you. That is so dangerous. That is a country I would not live in. I would leave before this man ever came close to power. And I love Canada, but I would leave. There is no way I would submit myself to that.
Of course, we can already hear the howls from the establishment. But how will you pay for all this? Well, let's remind them that this country is awash in wealth. We can have nice things. Banks made $70 billion in profits last year alone. Oil companies are expecting a new windfall in the tens of billions. Grocery baron Galen Weston alone is worth $20 billion. It is time, far past time, to properly tax the corporations and billionaires that have been riding a tidal wave of profits, while the 99% have been suffering and struggling, and use that money to directly improve the lives of Canadians. The money is there. The money is there, my friends. We need a government with the courage to go and get it for all of us.
What does it mean to go and get it? Okay? What does it mean to go and get it? I don't think it means anything good. I don't think they're going to ask nicely. And if you think it's going to stop at tax hikes, you're silly, because Canada is already so overtaxed. There's like 10% of Canadians who actually pay net tax, and they pay a very high marginal rate. So the idea that you can just keep taxing those same people, you know, yes, they're wealthy, but they also have the resources and the means to leave. Like, if Canada becomes this ridiculous, we're just going to see a mass exodus of anyone useful, more so than we already have, because we already have such a brain drain to the US. So we're just going to see a mass exodus of anybody who has resources, anybody who has talent, anybody who is at all useful, who thinks they might have resources one day, because no one wants to live in a place where they just get taken from you. But, you know, he calls out Galen Weston and Loblaws for making so much money. Loblaws makes about 3.9% profit margin. So that means for every $100 you spend at Loblaws, they make about $3.90 back. Of course, some things have higher margins, some things have lower margins. But the idea that our grocery stores are price fixing and that every increase in the cost of living grocery rise is the fault of big grocery stores and of Loblaws is just not true. They're not making very much money. It is the supply chains getting all messy, the carbon taxes taxing, you know, every point of food production. You know, they tax the farmers for their use of carbon, then they tax the transport companies for their use of carbon, then they tax the stores for their use of carbon, and they tax you getting your gas to go in your car to the store for your use of carbon. I mean, you can see how it adds up. I think it's ridiculous to blame this one on Galen Weston and on Loblaws. So the idea that you can tax someone like Galen Weston out of this problem is ridiculous. He has a net worth of about $20 billion. Canada this year alone, our budget is a deficit of $73 billion. You could give all of Galen Weston's money just directly to Canadians, and we each get $500. Like, this is not a reasonable thing. You could take all of the billionaires' money, all of them, and we would still be in a problem because we are vastly overspending our wealth. To say, oh, the wealth is there, the wealth is present, we just need to take it. It's actually not. And it's because we're hamstringing our economy. We could create more wealth. We could actually extract our resources. We could actually develop our industries. We could actually not have so much red tape and regulation on anybody who wants to start a business or make a profit and therefore pay taxes. But we don't. We just, this party especially, you know, the Liberals to some extent, but this party is like the antithesis of it, of like, We are going to hit you from every angle until your life sucks. And they do that because they are obsessed with equity. If everybody's life sucks the same, they have achieved their goal. They do not want to bring people up. They want to bring everybody down to the same sad level, and it's rock bottom.
The NDP will start winning again because we will become that beacon to the 99%. Illuminating the darkening sky of these terrifying times with the energizing light of collective struggle. This is about all of us coming together to find our place and our power in the thrilling work of building a shared future. A government that works for the many, not the money. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
I mean, he just sounds like Mandani. Like, the warm embrace of collectivism. Like, talk to anybody who has lived under collectivism. It sucks balls. Like, the point I'm trying to drive home here, in summary, is that yes, this conference was full of stupid, insane, dumb, weird-looking, crazy, silly people. But it was also full of people with really dangerous ideas who might actually be just competent enough to get some of them done, especially because Canada is so complacent, we're so lost, we're given so many different ideas of what we should and shouldn't be doing. And it's confusing, and I could see someone like this slimy Avi Lewis guy coming in and convincing a lot of Canadians that this is going to be the right choice for them. And I hope you can see it with clear eyes. I hope that you know that it's not. I hope you know that being stripped of all personal responsibility and being given everything by the government is not utopia, it is hell. So thank you so much for listening. If you liked what I was saying, if you disagree with it, please leave a comment down below. If you have a longer form response or something you'd like to share anonymously with me, you can email me at stephis.losingit@gmail.com. I'm also going to start making some short form content on my Instagram, which is steph.is.losin.it. I'm going to put that down in the box below so you can see it. Thank you so much. Please like, subscribe, share with a friend. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.